Good afternoon. Welcome to our favorite hymn time at First United Methodist Church, Mason City, Iowa, when we focus on favorite hymns of some of our congregation members. Today we're taking one that Gay Kim has chosen as her favorite hymn, and I'm sure is a favorite of many of you. She particularly likes the words that are in the Amazing Grace because it speaks to her of her life and the ups and downs that she's had, but it's the tremendous grace of Jesus Christ that has brought her to where she is today and enjoying a very full life. The background on this hymn is rather long, but I find it very interesting, so hopefully you will also. It's entitled, God Rescues a Rebel. It's the summer of 1725 in the city of London, England. John Newton was born. His mother, a devout member of the Dissenters, taught the young boy to pray and filled his mind with the scriptures. But it was John's father, an often absent sea captain, who captured the boy's imagination. John dreamed of sailing ships and the wild seas of adventures and mysterious destinations. Just before John's 7th birthday, his mother became ill and died, leaving her son a virtual orphan. Taken in by distant relatives, the little boy was mocked for his belief in God, discouraged from praying, and ridiculed for his childish faith. Unhappy and lonely, John turned again to his dreams of the sea, and at the age of 11, ran off to become an apprentice on his father's ship. If it was a close father-son relationship John desired, he was sadly disappointed. For like his foster family, his father also rejected him. For years, the young fellow plied the Mediterranean on sailing ships, enjoying all the experiences and immoralities offered in each exotic port. He was frequently fired for insubordination, but just as frequently hired by another ship's master, eager for young seamen and not too particular about their character. After a short stint in the British Navy, John deserted and ran away to Africa to seek his fortune and new adventures in the African slave trade. Signing on with an unscrupulous slave dealer, he found his situation had declined dramatically. In the slave trader's absences, John was left in the care of the man's vindictive wife, who imprisoned him in her quarters, beat him, and forced him to eat his food from the floor like a dog. Believing death was preferable to this kind of treatment, John escaped from his prison into the West African forests and eventually made his way to the Atlantic coast. After lighting signal fires, John was finally spotted by a passing ship's captain, who sent a small boat to shore to pick him up. The captain had hoped the lone man had gold or ivory to offer and was disappointed to receive instead a penniless runaway. Putting him to work as a mate, the captain learned later was an unwise decision. Becoming bored during a particularly long watch, John broke into the ship's supply of rum and generously shared it with the crew. Again demonstrating his lack of discipline, John downed a goodly amount of the liquor, became totally disoriented, and fell overboard. One of the ship's officers, either out of pity or spite, saved John from drowning by spearing him in the thigh with a harpoon and reeling him back aboard like a flailing fish. Painfully wounded and severely disciplined, Newton was relegated below decks where it was thought he could be no more trouble. It was a miserable journey from Africa to England in the stifling, stinking hold, and John had endless days and nights to ponder his empty life and unfulfilled dreams. Somehow a copy of Thomas à Klep's book, Imitation of Christ, fell into his hands. Reading the book awakened his conscience to the things of God, and he began to recall some of the early lessons learned at his mother's knee. As the slave ship neared Scotland, severe winds and rains battered her, and she began to take on water. Desperate measures were taken to keep her from sinking, and for days every able-bodied man, slave or free, bailed water from the foundering ship. Exhausted, frightened, and facing certain death, John Newton had a life-transforming experience with God. The assurance of God's love flooded his soul. Later, he would describe it as a miracle. an amazing manifestation of God's grace. Although that voyage was not his last, John Newton's heart became drawn in other directions. 2 years after his miraculous conversion, he married Mary Catlett, a devout Christian, and not long after that, John left the sea for good and became a minister. While he loved to preach and tended his little flock of believers with zealous care, his great joy was writing hymns to be sung at his weekly prayer meetings. He composed over 280 hymns, but the one for which he is most remembered came from his shipboard conversion and carries the message of his personal experience, Amazing Grace. And the words, Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. The Lord has promised good to me, his word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. I'd like to play for you Amazing Grace.